Thank you. And then if we can turn to page 1157, Chair. There at 1901, there's a message from the complainant where she said, indeed, with an emoji with a hand over the mouth and the blushing cheeks and the eyes are closed. How did you interpret that if you look at the conversation that took place?
You can interpret it two different ways, Chair. The one could be blushing cheeks with a smile, which is clearly visible to anybody and understandable. It can also be used, this specific emoji, as a sign of embarrassment. And I think many of us, Chair, can attest to that, to say we often, if we're embarrassed, we'd put our hand over our mouth and sort of laugh or giggle. So it's laughter. In this instance, it's coy laughter and not embarrassment within the context of this text chain.
Why do you say that?
Because I've taken into account the text before the preceding text as well.
Because they were talking about her kids.
Yes, they were talking about age. So it was in a joking nature, that it was very respectful, and there was a lot of jokes taking place within the context of this specific day and the preceding messages before this emoji appeared.
Right, and if we go just a little bit down, to 1903, there's a message from the respondent, and again, it's either the praying hands or the high five that was used there. How do you interpret that in the conversation that you were reading?
It speaks again, Chair, to the first message where we saw the angelic, respectful conversation that was sent by the respondent. So it follows on that. So in terms of this message, again within the context, it would speak to angelic behavior, respectful behavior.
So up until this stage, the conversation between the two of them were very respectful and nothing wrong with that.
Indeed, so that's correct.
And then if we turn to page 1159, at 1905, they are still talking about the ages between of her child and herself. At 1905, there's a message from the respondent with just after the 1904 one. How do you interpret that's a monkey with their eyes closed?
So in that instance, the emoji is not, Chair, applied in the standard context of see no evil. In this instance, it would be applied to say, it can be applied in the context of embarrassment. Again, we all use that to close our eyes and say, oh, I'm so embarrassed. But in this context, again, maybe slight embarrassment, but probably willful ignorance to say, look, I can't believe what I saw. And again, there was nothing wrong with this, the use of this emoji within this context, because the conversation was completely respectful. They were talking about age and the fact that the complainant didn't look her age, and in relation to her daughter's age as well.
Yeah, according to the translation that we got, was the age difference between the two of them were 16 or 18 years. That's in that context that the emoji was used.
Yes, that is correct, Chair.
And then just after that, the complainant also used emojis. It started with the 4 laughing emojis as well, and then the message ended with a monkey again closing his eyes. How do you interpret those?
So the 4 laughing emojis, Chair, would be actually a sign of your reinforcement and your emphasis function that I explained earlier, specifically because that laughing face emoji is used more than once. And the laughing face emoji, where it's tilted on its side and the eyes are closed, but the smile is very broad and the tears of joy are there, so you'd be rolling on the floor laughing. So it's a real joke in a sense, Chair. That was being conveyed there. The monkey emoji that is used at the end, again, correlates with those laughing face emojis, where we're talking about laughing and, when you're cringing almost with laughing. So again, it reinforces and emphasizes the conversation and the written text.
When she asked him, did you really calculate that?
That is correct, Chair.
And she was laughing about that.
That is correct, Chair.
And then the respondent followed it up with 4 laughing emojis.
Again, the same thing would apply because it's in a joking manner, the way the conversation is being unpacked, reinforcement, emphasis, and response. I know that there's no text there, but it follows on to the previous text.
And again, if you interpreted the laughing emojis on its own without looking at the previous text, would you have been able to understand what the laughing was about?
No.
And how to interpret it?
No, I would not have.
Then just a bit lower on that screen grab, at 1908, there was a message from the complainant completely used, where she only used emojis. It was 3 laughing emojis and 5 monkeys closing its eyes. How do you interpret that type of message where she used a number of emojis?
Again, we'd look specifically at sequencing, which I did. And because the laughing face emoji was used repetitively, Chair, as well as the closed eyes emoji, monkey emoji, those 2 emojis within that specific sequence would show what I've just explained previously, laughing, rolling on the floor laughing, and the sort of the cringing laughing where you'd close your eyes, you'd be laughing so much.
And still they were talking about the age.
That is correct. So it follows on to the next text message at 1908 when the complainant said old. So that's exactly following it. Those 2 messages need to be read and interpreted together.
And then the respondent followed that up with a reply. How do you interpret that reply?
The 2 emojis might be seen as contradictory in that instance because we have the angelic behavior emoji, which I've explained, and then we have the tongue out with the one eye closed, which is actually the winking emoji. But in that instance, again, the tongue out with a winking eye emoji is not insulting at all to the complainant. It merely continues on to the same text chain to explain that it was laughing, it was meant in a joking way.
So after you've read this conversation, this was a joking conversation. They were laughing. There was nothing serious about this, if you interpret the conversation.
That is correct.
Then if we turn to page 1160, at 1910, there was the complainant replied to a text message of the respondent, and there's a lot of emojis used in that message. How do you interpret that? Yeah, they are still talking about age.
It follows, Chair, on the exact text chain. So again, it was meant in a laughing, joking way. There was nothing else to interpret in that instance. It was shyness, and shyness from a point of laughter. Again, closing the eyes with that cringing, I can't stop laughing emoji. Repetition and emphasis was clear there.
And the interpretation there, that was to conduct yourself in a good manner, or the thin voice. The voice was that she was talking about a voice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That the voice sounds younger.
That is correct.
And that's why they were joking about that.
That is correct, Chair.
And then later on, at 1910, there's the one emoji used by the complainant on the reply by the respondent.
In that instance, the closed eyes monkey emoji would mean shyness. That was conveyed through the use of that emoji.
Because they were now talking about a voice.
That is correct, Chair.
Then at 1912, they're still talking about a voice. When the respondent said, when first I heard it, I couldn't believe it. Talking about a voice, she replied by the 4 laughing emojis, and I'm listening. How do you interpret that?
In that instance, the 4 laughing emojis would not be seen as the function of contradiction, Chair, given the text chain. So again, context is important in that instance. In this instance, the function would be complementation.
To complement the written text.
That is correct.
Still in a jovial manner.
Still in a jovial manner.